I'm Samantha, 32 years old, and until last month, I was the third-generation heir to Mason Furniture. When my mother's voicemail came through saying I was out of the family business, I didn't argue or plead. I simply replied understood and quietly sold my 40% share. 48 hours later, my phone exploded with 72 missed calls and my brother Justin begging me to undo it. Was this revenge or something deeper? Let me share my story. Before I begin, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Mason Furniture wasn't just a company to me. It was woven into every fiber of my being, like the grains in the wood we crafted into beautiful pieces. My grandfather Arthur Mason started it as a small woodworking shop in 1952, and my father Harold transformed it into the regional powerhouse it became. While Grandpa Arthur built solid, functional pieces that emphasized durability, Dad had an eye for merging function with artistic design. Under his guidance, Mason Furniture developed its signature style, timeless elegance with unexpected contemporary touches. Some of my earliest memories are set in that original workshop behind our family home. The sweet, earthy scent of freshly cut oak and maple. The rhythmic sounds of sanding blocks smoothing rough edges. The pride in my father's eyes when he completed a particularly challenging piece. I was barely 7 years old when Dad first let me help with a real project, a simple bookshelf for my bedroom. He guided my small hands as I applied stain to the wood, explaining how different types absorbed color differently and how the grain told the story of the tree's life. Just like people, Sammy, he'd say, using his special nickname for me. Every piece of wood has character, has lived through storms and sunshine. Our job isn't to hide those stories, but to highlight them, make them part of something new and beautiful. My father and I shared a special bond through our love of design. While my brother Justin was more interested in sports and later, the business aspects of the company, I inherited Dad's creative eye. By the time I was 12, I was sketching my own furniture designs. Dad would review them seriously, offering suggestions without ever dismissing my ideas. He kept every drawing, no matter how amateur, filing them away in a portfolio he labeled Sammy's Future Classics. Those childhood experiences shaped me, but they also shaped Mason Furniture. What began as a single store grew steadily under Dad's leadership. By the time I graduated from college, we had 12 locations across 3 states. Each store maintained the personal touch that made our brand special, with custom design consultations and pieces that told stories rather than just filled spaces. Dad was always the heart of the business, the perfect balance of creative visionary and practical businessman. He understood numbers, but never let them overshadow the artistry. My mother Amanda, who married into the business, handled the marketing and public relations side. Justin, 5 years my senior, shadowed Dad on the operational aspects. We functioned as a unit, each with our strengths, creating a business that felt like an extension of our family values. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. Dad suffered a massive heart attack at 59. One minute he was laughing over dinner about a client who wanted a dining table shaped like a fish, and the next he was gone. The foundation of our family and our business crumbled beneath us. Dad's will was clear and fair. Mom received 51% ownership as the majority shareholder and became CEO. Justin, with his business degree and 9 years of experience in the company, was named Chief Operating Officer and received 9% ownership. I received 40% and maintained my role as Design Director, the position Dad had created for me 2 years prior after I completed my MBA. The power dynamics shifted immediately. Mom had always preferred Justin, though Dad's presence had balanced her favoritism. Without that counterweight, the imbalance became glaring. Justin had spent years in the company but had focused almost exclusively on sales and operations. He knew little about design, the very essence of what made Mason Furniture special. Yet, suddenly, he was making decisions about our product lines and aesthetic direction. My position as design director gradually became ceremonial rather than functional. Where Dad had valued my input and featured my designs prominently in our catalogs, Mom and Justin began sidelining my contributions. Meetings where I presented new concepts became exercises in frustration as my ideas were consistently met with skepticism. That's a bit too modern for our clientele. We need to focus on profitability, not artistic expression, Justin would add, as if the two were mutually exclusive. The vision conflict became increasingly. Early warning signs appeared in small ways. I'd arrive at design meetings to find decisions had already been made without me. My team's budget was cut while marketing and sales saw increases. Justin began referring to himself as the face of Mason Furniture in press interviews, though Dad had always emphasized our collective family identity. Looking back, I should have recognized these changes as the first tremors before an earthquake. But grief clouded my judgment. I was still processing the loss of my father, my mentor, my biggest supporter. And I couldn't imagine that my own family would eventually push me out of the legacy he had built for all of us. While Mason Furniture was my heritage, my personal path had been taking shape alongside it. After high school, I attended Rhode Island School of Design, earning my degree in interior design with a focus on sustainable materials. Dad encouraged my education, seeing it as bringing fresh perspectives to the family business. For years later, I completed an MBA at Northwestern, balancing business acumen with creative training. This dual background gave me a unique perspective. I understood both the artistic integrity of furniture design and the business realities of manufacturing and retail. When I officially joined Mason Furniture after graduate school, Dad created the design director position specifically to utilize my combined skills. He saw the future of our industry shifting toward sustainability, customization, and digital integration, areas where my education had prepared me to lead. The business needs innovation to survive, he told me during one of our long talks in his office. Justin understands numbers and systems, which we need. But you understand people and what they'll want tomorrow, not just today. That's equally valuable. My perspective on furniture wasn't just academic. I believed deeply in creating pieces that were beautiful, functional, and environmentally responsible. I pushed for sourcing wood from certified sustainable forests, experimenting with reclaimed materials, and developing finishes with lower environmental impact. Dad supported these initiatives, though he balanced my enthusiasm with practical considerations about costs and production capabilities. 2 years before Dad's passing, with his blessing and investment, I launched Sam Designs as a small side venture. It wasn't competition for Mason Furniture, but rather a creative laboratory where I could develop more experimental concepts that might eventually influence the main company's direction. Dad saw it as a win-win, giving me creative freedom while potentially generating innovative approaches for Mason. Every business needs its research and development wing, he said. Think of Sam Designs as yours. My partner in this venture was Elaine Peterson, my roommate from design school who had gone on to specialize in materials engineering. Where I brought design vision, Elaine contributed technical knowledge about innovative materials and manufacturing processes. We complemented each other perfectly, turning concepts into viable products. Sam Designs operated from a small workshop I rented near my apartment, a 20-minute drive from Mason Furniture's headquarters. We focused on limited edition pieces that showcased sustainable design principles without compromising aesthetics or quality. Our maple dining chairs incorporated bent wood techniques that minimized waste while creating striking organic forms. Our modular shelving systems used interlocking components that eliminated the need for hardware. Initially, Sam Designs was more passion project than profit center. Elaine and I reinvested everything into developing new prototypes and refining our production methods. But within 18 months, our work began attracting attention. Design Quarterly featured our coffee table in their innovation section. An upscale restaurant in Chicago commissioned custom seating. A prominent architect specified our shelving for a library renovation. Mom's reaction to Sam Design's growing recognition was telling. While Dad had proudly shared our press coverage with Mason Furniture's board, Mom dismissed it as hobby success. Justin was even less supportive, referring to my little side project with barely concealed disdain during family dinners. "It's cute that you're playing with those eco-friendly concepts," he said once, "but real furniture businesses operate at scale, not making one-offs for people with too much money and guilt about the environment." Despite their attitudes, I maintained my commitment to both businesses. I scheduled my time carefully, never letting Sam Designs interfere with my responsibilities at Mason. I arrived early at the family company, stayed late when needed, and often worked on Sam Designs designs late into the night. The balancing act was exhausting but fulfilling. In both spaces, I was creating and contributing to a vision I believed in. The turning point came when Sam Designs secured a contract with Wyndham Hotels to design and produce furniture for their new eco-conscious boutique brand. The deal would transform my side business into a significant operation, requiring expanded production capabilities and additional staff. It validated everything I had been advocating for at Mason Furniture. There was a growing market for beautiful, sustainable design at commercial scale. I saw this as an opportunity for synergy. Sam Designs could develop the concepts and initial prototypes, while Mason Furniture, with its established manufacturing infrastructure, could handle full-scale production. I prepared a detailed proposal showing how this partnership would benefit both companies, bringing Mason into an emerging market while providing Sam Designs with manufacturing support. Before I could present this proposal, I received an unexpected call from Rachel Cooper, a former classmate who now worked in product development at Maxwell Furnishings, our largest competitor. We met for coffee, ostensibly to catch up, but her real purpose soon became clear. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Rachel said, glancing around the cafe, "but Maxwell is planning to approach you about Sam Designs. They've been watching your work, and they're impressed. They want to discuss potential acquisition or partnership." The news was flattering but concerning. If Maxwell was interested in the direction Sam Designs was taking, it confirmed my belief that sustainable design represented the future of our industry. But it also meant Mason Furniture was falling behind the curve, potentially losing market position to more forward-thinking competitors. That conversation with Rachel planted a seed in my mind. Not about selling to Maxwell, but about the possibility that my vision might find more support outside the family business than within it. It was a troubling thought, one I pushed aside as disloyal. But it lingered, especially as tensions at Mason Furniture continued to escalate. The boardroom at Mason Furniture featured a magnificent conference table that my grandfather had crafted himself. 16 feet of book-matched walnut with a natural edge, it was both a functional piece and a symbol of our heritage. Around this table, the growing conflict between my vision and the direction Mom and Justin were taking the company played out with increasing intensity. Quarterly planning meetings became battlegrounds. I would arrive prepared with market research, trend analyses, and detailed design concepts, only to have them dismissed without serious consideration. One particularly frustrating session centered on our fall collection. I had developed a line that incorporated traditional joinery techniques with contemporary forms, maintaining our quality standards while appealing to younger consumers. The demographic data shows clearly that millennials and Gen Z are becoming major purchasers of quality furniture, I explained, displaying slides that tracked purchasing patterns. They value craftsmanship, but want designs that work in smaller urban spaces. This collection addresses both needs. Justin barely looked at the presentation before responding. Our core customers are 50-plus homeowners with disposable income. Chasing trends for young people who buy from IKEA is a waste of resources. They buy from IKEA because affordable options with contemporary aesthetics are limited, I countered. We have an opportunity to capture that market as they mature professionally and can invest in quality pieces. Mom cut the discussion short. We'll stick with the traditional line for fall. Samantha, you can develop one or two of these more modern pieces as special order options if you insist. This pattern repeated across meetings. My data-driven proposals were consistently overruled in favor of the familiar. The design team that reported to me grew frustrated as their work was repeatedly shelved, and I found myself defending decisions I disagreed with. The situation came to a head during a presentation to our largest retail partner. I had prepared a comprehensive overview of our upcoming seasonal offerings, including some concepts that had received preliminary approval. Mid-presentation, Mom interrupted. I think what my daughter is failing to explain clearly is that these are merely conceptual explorations. Our actual production line will continue to focus on the classic Mason styles our customers expect. The public contradiction was humiliating. The retail buyers exchanged awkward glances, and I struggled to maintain my professional composure for the remainder of the meeting. Afterward, when I confronted Mom about undermining me, she was dismissive. You needed to be reined in. Those buyers weren't impressed with your modern notions. Anyone could see that. The retail partner later contacted me directly to express interest in several of the designs Mom had dismissed, confirming my read of the market. But when I shared this feedback, it was ignored. Another painful incident involved intellectual property. I had designed a rocking chair that incorporated subtle ergonomic improvements while maintaining a traditional silhouette. The design won an industry award for innovation, a significant recognition for Mason furniture. At the awards ceremony, Justin accepted the honor and gave an interview to Furniture Today magazine, speaking about his design process without mentioning my name once. When the magazine hit stands with Justin's photo captioned, "Design Innovator Justin Mason accepts award for revolutionary rocking chair design," I was livid. Confronting him privately led nowhere. "It's a company award, not a personal one," he argued. "As COO, I represent the company. Besides, the design team reports to you, but you report to me in the organizational structure." That wasn't true, at least not officially, but it revealed how Justin viewed the hierarchy. In his mind, my contributions belonged to him by virtue of his position. Financial discrepancies became another source of tension. Reviewing departmental budgets, I noticed inconsistencies in how design expenses were categorized compared to other departments. Design costs were inflated by including items that should have been allocated elsewhere, making my department appear less profitable than it was. Further investigation revealed deeper concerns. "These arrangements were approved by your mother and brother," she said carefully. "I suggest you discuss your concerns directly with them." I compiled my findings and requested a private meeting with Mom and Justin. The discussion quickly became heated. "Are you accusing us of financial impropriety?" Mom demanded, her voice rising. "I'm pointing out inconsistencies that disadvantage the design department and misrepresent our contribution to the company's profitability," I replied, trying to remain calm. Justin's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly the problem. You're more concerned with getting credit than with the company's overall success. Your little design awards don't pay the bills." "Actually, they do," I countered. "Our award-winning pieces consistently outperform sales projections by 20% or more. I have the data right here." "Data can be manipulated," Mom said dismissively. "The reality is that your department costs more than it contributes. These budget allocations reflect that reality." The conversation devolved further, with accusations flying. Justin suggested my divided loyalty between Mason Furniture and Sam Designs was the real problem. Mom implied that Dad had coddled me, creating unrealistic expectations about my role in the company. "Your father was an excellent designer, but sometimes naive about business realities," she said. "Justin and I are making the hard decisions needed to ensure Mason Furniture survives in a competitive marketplace." I left that meeting shaken. The financial manipulations suggested something more troubling than mere family dysfunction. Were Mom and Justin deliberately undermining my position in the company? Were they laying groundwork to reduce my ownership stake? My suspicions intensified when I overheard fragments of a phone conversation between Justin and someone he referred to as Frank. Passing by Justin's office, I heard him say, We need to move forward with the restructuring before she catches on. Frank, we need those papers ready by next week. Frank Donovan was the company's attorney. Restructuring could mean many things, none of them likely to be in my favor. The final straw came when I discovered a calendar invitation on the shared executive schedule. A meeting titled Strategic Reorganization was set for the following Tuesday with attendees listed as Amanda Mason, Justin Mason, Frank Donovan, and Patricia Williams, a corporate attorney I didn't recognize. My name was conspicuously absent, though as a major shareholder, I should have been included in any significant restructuring discussion. It was becoming painfully clear my mother and brother were planning something that would impact my position, possibly my ownership stake, and they were deliberately keeping me in the dark. The family business was no longer a place where I was valued or even respected. It had become a battlefield, and I was outnumbered. Tuesday, April 9th began like any other workday. I arrived at the office at 7:30, earlier than most of the staff, to prepare for two significant presentations. The morning would be dedicated to reviewing new designs for Mason Furniture's summer catalog. The afternoon was blocked for finalizing my presentation to Wyndham Hotels for the Sam Designs contract, which I planned to complete during lunch. There was a nervous energy in my movements that morning. The strategic reorganization meeting I wasn't invited to was scheduled for 4 o'clock. I had decided to confront Mom and Justin before then, demanding transparency about plans that would affect my position in the company. But first, I needed to get through my existing commitments. The design review went surprisingly well. The team had created some exceptional pieces that balanced our traditional craftsmanship with more contemporary aesthetics. Even Justin seemed impressed with a particular writing desk that featured hidden technology integration while maintaining a classic appearance. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps my vision for the company's evolution might still find acceptance. During the lunch break, I retreated to my office to refine the Wyndham presentation. While reviewing financial projections, I noticed something concerning in the manufacturing cost estimates. A recent contract signed with Riverside Lumber, a new supplier Justin had insisted on using, included pricing that was nearly 20% higher than our previous vendor for comparable materials. This wasn't just poor negotiation. The discrepancy was too significant. I pulled up the contract details in our system and noticed something else. Riverside Lumber LLC had been incorporated just 6 months earlier. A quick internet search revealed minimal information about the company, just a basic website and a business address that appeared to be a mail forwarding service. My instincts told me something wasn't right. I called our previous lumber supplier under the pretense of checking availability for a special order. During our conversation, I casually asked if they knew anything about Riverside. "Funny you should ask," the representative said. "We were surprised when Mason dropped us. Word in the industry is that Riverside is actually owned by Northern Holdings Group. They're just operating under a different name." Northern Holdings Group was a private investment company. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place why. After ending the call, I searched through my emails and found it. Northern Holdings had been mentioned in correspondence between Justin and our banking partners 3 months earlier. The context suggested they were providing some sort of financing arrangement to Mason Furniture. The pieces started connecting in my mind. Was Justin funneling company money to a supplier that was somehow connected to a firm providing financing to Mason? If so, this went beyond family disagreements into potentially unethical business practices. I printed the relevant documents and headed to Justin's office, determined to get answers. He wasn't there, but his executive assistant mentioned he was in a private meeting with Mom and Frank Donovan. They had started early, apparently. Returning to my office, I found 3 voicemails waiting. The first was from Elaine, confirming final details for the Wyndham presentation. The second was from the Wyndham procurement director, expressing enthusiasm about our upcoming meeting. The third made my blood run cold. "Samantha, this is your mother." Her voice was icier than I'd ever heard it. The board has met in emergency session this morning and has determined that your services are no longer required at Mason Furniture. Your dual role with that side business of yours constitutes a conflict of interest that we can no longer accommodate. You are hereby removed from your position as design director, effective immediately. You are out of the family business. Expect a call from our lawyer regarding the terms. Do not attempt to access company systems or premises without authorization. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear as the message ended. The timestamp showed it had been left just 20 minutes earlier. My hands trembled as I set the phone down on my desk. They had done it. Without warning, without discussion, without even the courtesy of telling me face to face, they had pushed me out. The initial shock gave way to a wave of emotions: betrayal, hurt, anger, disbelief. The family business my grandfather had built, that my father had grown with love and integrity, was now a place where I was treated as an adversary rather than a daughter and sister. The realization was like a physical pain in my chest. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to feel it all. 5 minutes to let the tears come, to let my breathing become ragged, to press my palms against my eyes as if I could physically hold back the hurt. Then I straightened my back, wiped my face, and began to think strategically. This wasn't just about a job. As a 40% shareholder, I had rights they couldn't simply dismiss with a voicemail. Whatever terms their lawyer planned to present would almost certainly aim to diminish those rights. I needed to understand my position before engaging with them. Rather than responding to Mom's message immediately, I called Catherine Sullivan, a law school friend who specialized in corporate governance. She agreed to meet me that afternoon. Bring any documentation you have, she advised. Shareholder agreements, bylaws, your father's will, anything related to your ownership stake. As I gathered the documents from my personal files, I found a sealed envelope I hadn't noticed before. It was labeled "For Sammy, in case of trouble," in my father's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 3 months before his death, along with copies of legal documents. Dearest Sammy, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means you've encountered serious resistance at Mason Furniture. I've always hoped the transition after my retirement or passing would be smooth, but I'm realistic about family dynamics. Your mother and brother may not fully appreciate your contributions or vision. This doesn't reflect on your value or abilities, only on their limitations in seeing them. I've attached documentation of the protective measures I've put in place as part of my estate planning. Your 40% ownership comes with specific rights that cannot be diminished without your consent, regardless of board votes or management decisions. The company bylaws require 75% shareholder approval for any restructuring that would affect ownership distribution. Trust your instincts, Sammy. You understand both the heart and mind of this business in ways the others don't. Whatever path you choose, know that my confidence in you is absolute. With all my love, Dad. Reading his words brought fresh tears, but also a sense of clarity and resolve. Dad had anticipated this scenario and had taken steps to protect me. I wasn't as vulnerable as Mom and Justin likely believed. After meeting with Catherine and reviewing all the documentation, I understood my position much better. While they could remove me from my management role, they could not force me to relinquish my ownership stake or accept unfavorable terms. Any major changes to the company structure would require my approval given the 75% threshold. With this knowledge, I crafted a simple response to my mother's voicemail. No arguments, no emotional appeals, no desperate attempts to change her mind. Just 2 words, texted from my personal phone to hers: understood. That evening, alone in my apartment, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset and thinking about my father. What would he advise me to do now? Fight to reclaim my position? Use my ownership stake as leverage? Or was there another path, one that honored his legacy while allowing me to move forward with integrity? The answer came not in words, but in a memory. Dad standing in his workshop, holding up a piece of cherry wood with a large knot that most would consider a flaw. Sometimes, Sammy, he had said, what looks like damage actually gives the piece its character. The art is in working with what you have, not wishing for perfect material. My situation wasn't what I would have. The next morning, I woke with surprising clarity about what I needed to do. My 40% ownership of Mason Furniture was more than just a financial asset. It was leverage that Mom and Justin hadn't properly considered when they ousted me. Now I needed to determine exactly what that leverage was worth. First, I needed to understand the current valuation of the company. Dad had always been transparent about finances, insisting that all family members should understand the business completely. After his death, that transparency had diminished, but I still had access to the last few years of financial statements. The Mason Furniture of today wasn't the same company it had been under Dad's leadership. Reviewing the numbers, I could see concerning trends: increasing debt, decreasing profit margins, and a significant inventory buildup of slower-selling traditional lines. The company wasn't in immediate danger, but the trajectory was troubling. I consulted with Margaret Winters, a business valuation specialist Catherine recommended. After reviewing the financial documents, Margaret provided an assessment. Based on current financials and market conditions, your 40% stake would be worth approximately $12 million, she explained. However, there are complicating factors. The company has taken on significant debt in the past 2 years, using real estate assets as collateral. There's also the matter of the brand value, which is substantial but difficult to quantify precisely. $12 million. The figure was both impressive and somehow disappointing. Under better management, Mason Furniture should have been worth considerably more. My next step was more delicate. I contacted Alexander Maxwell, CEO of Maxwell Furnishings. The company Rachel had mentioned was interested in Sam Designs. I was careful not to reveal my situation at Mason, presenting the meeting as exploratory discussions about potential collaboration. Alexander suggested meeting at a neutral location, a private dining room at Lou Bernardine in the city. He was younger than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with a reputation for modernizing the formerly staid Maxwell brand. Over lunch, we discussed industry trends, design philosophy, and the challenges of balancing tradition with innovation. Maxwell has been watching your work at Sam Designs with interest, Alexander said. Your approach to sustainable luxury aligns with our strategic direction. We've been looking to strengthen our position in that market segment. I asked thoughtful questions about Maxwell's manufacturing capabilities, their commitment to sustainability, and their corporate culture. Alexander answered candidly, also expressing admiration for Mason Furniture's craftsmanship tradition. The Mason legacy of quality is remarkable, he said. I've always respected how your father maintained exceptional standards while expanding the business. Only after establishing this foundation of mutual respect did I broach the real purpose of our meeting. I'm considering divesting my ownership stake in Mason Furniture, I said carefully. Before exploring other options, I wanted to gauge whether Maxwell might have interest in acquiring a significant position in the company. Alexander's expression registered surprise, then thoughtful consideration. That would be a substantial development. May I ask what percentage stake we're discussing? 40%, I replied. Enough to be a major voice in the company's direction, though not controlling interest. I see. Alexander paused. And the current management would be amenable to this arrangement? They would need to adapt, I said, maintaining a neutral tone. The bylaws require their cooperation with any significant shareholder. Over the next hour, our conversation shifted to specifics. Alexander was clearly interested but cautious. A 40% stake in a competitor would be a major investment requiring board approval. He asked penetrating questions about Mason's financial health, market position, and operational structure. I answered honestly, neither exaggerating the company's strengths nor emphasizing its weaknesses. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finding the right steward for my stake in the family legacy. There would be conditions to any sale, I explained. protections for current employees, commitments to maintaining quality standards, and recognition of the Mason heritage. Alexander nodded. Those conditions align with how we would approach such an acquisition. Maxwell has always grown by respecting the unique value of the brands we incorporate, not by dismantling them. By the end of lunch, Alexander had made a preliminary offer, contingent on due diligence and board approval. The figure was in line with Margaret's valuation, with potential performance-based increases. He promised to expedite the process, understanding my desire for a clean, quick transaction. I'll need 48 hours to secure formal approval and prepare the necessary documentation, he said as we concluded our meeting. Is that timeline acceptable? I agreed, knowing that every hour increased the risk of Mom and Justin discovering my plan. We shook hands, and I left with a mixture of relief and melancholy. I was taking a decisive step away from the family business, but it felt like the only path forward that preserved both my dignity and the company's potential. Back in my apartment, I spent the evening reviewing. One section particularly caught my attention. Maxwell offered me a position as creative director for a new division that would merge Sam Design's aesthetic with Mason's craftsmanship tradition. The role would be independent, allowing me to maintain Sam Designs as a separate entity while contributing to the evolution of both brands. It was exactly the type of synergy I had envisioned, but had been unable to achieve within the family structure. The weight of what I was doing hit me as I prepared for bed that night. I was severing a connection that had defined much of my life. The building where I had played as a child, learned from my father, and developed my professional identity would no longer be mine. The family name on the products would remain, but my direct influence would end. I wondered if I was betraying Dad's legacy by selling my stake. But then I remembered his letter. Trust your instincts, Sammy. He had believed in my understanding of the business, in my vision. Perhaps honoring that vision, even outside the family structure, was the truest way to honor him. The next morning, the due diligence process began in earnest. Maxwell's financial team requested additional documentation, which I provided from my personal records. Their legal department drafted formal agreements. By late afternoon of the second day, everything was in place. I met Alexander at his attorney's office to sign the final paperwork. As I penned my signature on the transfer documents, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for what was ending, anxiety about potential fallout, but also a surprising sense of liberation. For the first time since Dad's death, I was making a choice that was entirely my own, not reactive to Mom and Justin's manipulations. "Congratulations, Samantha," Alexander said, shaking my hand after the documents were signed. "I believe this partnership will benefit both of us, as well as the employees and customers of both companies." With the transaction complete, I had one final obligation. As a matter of corporate governance and professional courtesy, I needed to formally notify the Mason Furniture Board of Directors. I drafted a concise email to the board secretary with relevant documentation attached. "Please be advised that effective immediately, I have transferred my 40% ownership stake in Mason Furniture to Maxwell Furnishings Corporation. All future communications regarding shareholder matters should be directed to their corporate office. I appreciate the opportunity to have contributed to the company my grandfather founded and wish all employees continued success." I hit send at exactly 4:30 on Thursday afternoon, 48 hours after receiving my mother's voicemail. Then I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and prepared to wait for the storm. My reprieve lasted exactly 11 hours. At 3:30 Friday morning, I was awakened by pounding on my apartment door. Disoriented and alarmed, I checked the security camera on my phone. Justin stood in the hallway, his appearance disheveled, his expression frantic. I considered not answering, but the neighbors didn't deserve a pre-dawn disturbance. Opening the door, I blocked the entrance with my body. "It's 3:30 in the morning, Justin," I said flatly. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. "Maxwell? You sold to Maxwell? Our biggest competitor." I sold my shares to a reputable company that values quality and innovation, I replied. Something you and Mom seem to have forgotten about. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Dad that it momentarily softened my resolve. You don't understand what you've done, he said, his tone shifting from anger to something closer to desperation. We need those shares back. Name your price. Whatever Maxwell paid, we'll match it plus 20%. It's not about the money, I said. And the transaction is complete. There's no reversing it. Please, Samantha, he said, using my full name rather than the dismissive Sam he'd adopted in recent years. You have to help us fix this. Mom is. She's not well. When she got the notification, she nearly collapsed. That's concerning, I said, genuinely worried despite everything. But it doesn't change the facts. You both made decisions that pushed me out. I made a decision in response. That's business. Justin's facade cracked further. It's not just business. If Maxwell holds 40% and we can't buy it back, we lose control. The loan covenants specify that the Mason family must maintain at least 60% ownership. We're in default as of this morning. This was new information. What loans? Justin looked away, seemingly debating how much to reveal. We've had cash flow issues. The expansion into the Dallas market cost more than projected, and some investments didn't perform as expected. What investments? I pressed. Real estate, mostly, he admitted. Mom wanted to diversify our holdings. The picture was becoming clearer. Mom and Justin had leveraged the company for speculative investments, likely the same Northern Holdings connection I'd begun to uncover. They'd hidden the financial situation from me, all while positioning my department as the financial drain. How bad is it? I asked. Without your shares, we default on $8 million in loans. The banks can call the notes immediately. We don't have the liquidity to cover that. The magnitude of their mismanagement stunned me. Dad had always maintained reasonable debt levels and substantial cash reserves. In just 3 years, they had jeopardized the company's financial stability while blaming me for increased costs. That explains the sudden emergency board meeting and my termination, I said, the pieces fitting together. You needed a scapegoat for the financial problems and a way to potentially access my shares. Justin didn't deny it. We thought we could convince you to sell your shares back to the company over time. We never imagined you'd sell to Maxwell immediately. You never imagined I had options, I corrected him. That was your mistake. Our conversation was interrupted by my phone vibrating continuously on the side table. Glancing over, I saw the screen filled with notifications, 27 missed calls, 30-plus text messages, and numerous voicemails. That's been happening since the notification went out, Justin said. Mom's called you at least 40 times. I picked up the phone and scrolled through the messages. They ranged from Mom's initial fury, "How dare you betray the family like this?" to increasingly desperate pleas. "Please call immediately. We can work this out." The most recent simply read, "Samantha, I'm begging you. The family legacy is at stake." Seeing my attention on the phone, Justin pressed his advantage. Just talk to her. Hear her out. There must be some way to undo this before the banks take action. Part of me wanted to refuse, to let them face the consequences of their actions without my intervention. They had excluded me from decisions, undermined my contributions, and ultimately fired me via voicemail. Why should I help them now? But another part recognized that many innocent people would be affected by a financial collapse. The craftspeople who had worked for Mason for decades. The office staff who processed orders and managed customer service. The retail employees across our 12 locations. None of them deserved to suffer for management's poor decisions. I'll call her in the morning, I said finally. Not now, not at 4 a.m. Go home, Justin. Get some sleep if you can. He seemed about to argue, but then nodded dejectedly. First thing in the morning? This is time sensitive. First thing, I agreed, closing the door as he turned to leave. Sleep was impossible after that interaction. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, reading through the cascade of messages that continued to arrive. By dawn, the count stood at 72 missed calls, primarily from Mom and Justin, but also from Frank Donovan, board members, and even distant relatives who must have been enlisted to pressure me. At exactly 8 a.m., I called my mother. She answered immediately. "Samantha? Thank God. We need to meet right away. This situation is fixable if we act quickly." "I'll meet you at 10 at Catherine Sullivan's office," I said, naming my attorney. "Bring Justin and Frank if you want, but I'll only discuss this with legal representation present." Mom started to object, but I ended the call. I needed the emotional buffer of professional setting, not the manipulation potential of a family home or the power dynamics of the Mason furniture offices. Catherine's corner office provided a neutral setting with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She had arranged a conference table with water, coffee, and notepads, giving the meeting an appropriately formal atmosphere. I arrived early to brief her on the overnight developments. Mom arrived precisely at 10, accompanied by Justin and Frank Donovan. She had clearly made an effort with her appearance, but her complexion was ashen, her usual perfect composure fractured by stress. Justin looked as though he hadn't slept at all. "Thank you for meeting," Mom began, her tone conciliatory. "I think there's been a serious misunderstanding that we need to correct." "I don't think I misunderstood being fired via voicemail," I replied evenly, "or being told to expect a call from your lawyer about terms." Mom had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That was poorly handled. I was upset about discovering your meeting with Wyndham Hotels, which represented a clear conflict of interest." "A meeting you knew about for weeks," I pointed out. "It was on the shared executive calendar." "The timing was unfortunate," Frank Donovan interjected. "But the immediate issue is the share transfer to Maxwell. We believe we can structure a repurchase that would benefit all parties." Catherine spoke up. "My client has entered into a binding agreement with Maxwell Furnishings. They have been quite clear about their intention to maintain their investment. There must be a price at which they'd sell. This isn't just about money for them," I explained. "It's strategic. Maxwell has wanted to acquire sustainable manufacturing capabilities and expand their market position in our region. My shares give them both." The conversation circled repeatedly around the same points. They offered increasingly desperate solutions, selling real estate assets to raise capital, bringing in outside investors, though that would further dilute their ownership, even suggesting I might maintain a role in the company despite the termination, an offer that came far too late. Finally, Mom asked the others to give us a few minutes alone. When the door closed behind them, her carefully maintained facade crumbled. "Samantha, I'm begging you as your mother, not as CEO. This company is our family's legacy. Your grandfather's creation. Your father's life's work. Please don't let it fall apart on my watch. You should have thought about that legacy before leveraging it for speculative investments," I said, my tone softer but firm. "Before pushing out the person Dad trusted to carry forward his vision." "I made mistakes," she admitted, tears forming. "I thought I was protecting the company, ensuring its future. Justin seemed to understand the business side in ways you and your father approached more artistically. That perceived division between business and artistry was always your blind spot," I said. "Dad understood both. He knew that Mason's value came from integrating them seamlessly." Mom looked down at her hands. "Harold made it seem effortless. After he died, I was terrified of failing. Justin offered certainty, concrete plans. Your ideas felt risky, untested." For the first time, I glimpsed the fear behind her actions. Mom had never been involved in the creative side of the business. Without Dad's bridging presence, she had retreated to what felt controllable, even if it meant rejecting innovation the company needed. "I understand being afraid," I said. "But you didn't trust me enough to even discuss these issues openly. Instead, you marginalized me, undermined me, and ultimately discarded me." "I know," she whispered. "I can't undo that. But please, Help us find a solution that doesn't destroy everything your father built." I considered her plea carefully. The company's predicament was serious, but perhaps not irreversible. Maxwell hadn't purchased the shares to dismantle Mason Furniture, but to gain strategic advantages. Perhaps there was a middle path that could preserve jobs and honor Dad's legacy while respecting my decision to move forward independently. "I can't reverse the sale," I said finally. "But I can speak with Alexander Maxwell about the loan covenants. He might be willing to work with the banks on a revised agreement that gives you time to stabilize the finances." It wasn't the solution she wanted, but relief visibly washed over her face at this small concession. "Thank you," she said. "That would give us a chance at least." As the meeting concluded, other family members began reaching out. Uncle Walter, Dad's younger brother who had pursued a career in education rather than joining the family business, called to express his support for my decision. "Harold always said you had the best instincts of anyone in the family," he told me. "He would have understood why you needed to chart your own course." Aunt Barbara, Mom's sister, was predictably less supportive. Her voicemail accused me of disloyalty and selfishness. I deleted it without responding. The following weeks brought constant pressure and emotional appeals. Justin alternated between anger and dejected acceptance. Cousins I rarely heard from suddenly had strong opinions about family obligation. Board members made veiled suggestions about potential legal challenges, though Catherine assured me my position was legally sound. Through it all, I maintained my boundary. The sale would stand. I would help facilitate discussions between Maxwell and the banks to prevent immediate default, but I would not return to the dynamic that had become so toxic. It was a difficult position to maintain. Despite everything, these were the people I had loved my entire life. The company had been my second home. Watching their distress triggered waves of guilt, even though logically I knew I hadn't created the underlying problems. But with each passing day, as I focused on Sam Designs and my new collaborative role with Maxwell, I found increasing clarity. Sometimes loving your family means refusing to participate in destructive patterns. Sometimes honoring a legacy means carrying forward its values in a new context, rather than clinging to its original form. In this painful crucible, I was forging a new understanding of myself, separate from the Mason Furniture heir identity that had defined me for so long. It hurt, but within that pain was the possibility of growth that would have been impossible within the confines of what my mother and brother had wanted me to be. 6 months passed like a strange dream, alternating between intense productivity and moments of unexpected grief. Sam Designs flourished beyond my most optimistic projections. The Wyndham Hotel's contract led to similar opportunities with 2 other hospitality groups. We moved from our modest workshop to a proper studio with 6 full-time designers and relationships with artisan manufacturers who could execute our concepts at scale. My collaboration with Maxwell Furnishings evolved organically. Alexander proved to be a thoughtful partner, respectful of my design philosophy, while bringing valuable perspective on commercial viability. The new division we created, Mason by Maxwell, maintained the quality standards of the original brand while incorporating sustainable materials and contemporary aesthetics. The most surprising development was the gradual transformation at Mason Furniture itself. The loan crisis had been averted through complex negotiations that gave the company breathing room to restructure its debt. Maxwell, as a major shareholder, had insisted on financial transparency and sound governance practices as conditions for their cooperation with the banks. Justin, faced with the near collapse of the company, "I underestimated you," he admitted during a rare lunch meeting 3 months after the sale. "I saw your design focus as a limitation rather than understanding how it connected to the whole business vision." "Dad tried to tell you that for years," I replied, not unkindly. "He saw complementary strengths in both of us." "I was jealous," Justin acknowledged, surprising me with his candor. "The way he looked at your designs with such pride. I never got that same look for sales figures or operational efficiencies." "He was proud of those things too," I said, remembering how Dad had bragged about Justin's systematic improvements to the production workflow. He just expressed it differently. This new honesty between us didn't erase the past, but it created possibility for a different kind of sibling relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than competition. Mom's transformation was slower and more complex. Her identity had been so thoroughly intertwined with being the Mason family matriarch that my independence represented a personal rejection in her mind. For months, she maintained a chilly distance, communicating only when absolutely necessary for business matters. The first thaw came at an industry awards ceremony where both Mason Furniture and Sam Designs were being recognized. We encountered each other during the pre-dinner reception, awkwardly sipping champagne in the same conversational circle. "Your father would have been proud," she said quietly, nodding toward the display featuring my nominated design. "It has his eye for proportion, but entirely your own aesthetic." Coming from her, this represented significant effort. I accepted it as the peace offering it was intended to be. "Thank you," I replied. "That means a lot." We didn't become best friends overnight, but small moments of connection accumulated. A brief call on my birthday. A text message acknowledging a positive review of Sam Designs in Architectural Digest. Each interaction less loaded with recrimination than the last. By the 6-month mark, we had established a new equilibrium. Mason Furniture continued under the leadership of Mom and Justin, with Maxwell's 40% stake ensuring adherence to sound business practices. The product lines began to cautiously incorporate more sustainable materials and contemporary designs, though at a more conservative pace than I would have implemented. Sam Designs maintained its identity as a boutique studio focused on innovation, while my consulting role with Maxwell allowed me to influence larger-scale production. It was in many ways the synergy I had originally envisioned, though achieved through a path none of us could have predicted. The most profound changes, however, were internal. Through this painful journey, I discovered truths about myself and about life that no business school or design program could have taught me. I learned that self-respect must precede family loyalty. For years, I had accepted diminishment in the name of keeping peace, avoiding conflict, honoring tradition. But that approach served no one well, not even those who seemed to benefit from my compliance. By standing firmly in my worth, I ultimately created the possibility for more authentic relationships with my family members. I learned that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for healthy connections. When I sold my shares, it felt like the ultimate separation, a severing of family ties. In reality, it created space for relationships based on choice rather than obligation and resentment. Justin and I now communicate more honestly as siblings than we ever did as business partners. I learned that my father's legacy wasn't Mason Furniture, it was the values he embodied through that business. His commitment to quality, his balance of tradition and innovation, his respect for both creativity and practicality, these were the true inheritance he left me. And I could honor those values regardless of which company name appeared on my business card. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that sometimes walking away requires more courage than staying to fight. Our culture celebrates standing your ground, never giving up, battling until victory. But there are situations where the most powerful choice is to simply say, "Understood," and chart a different course. That quiet power, the freedom to redefine success on your own terms, can be revolutionary. My journey from family business heir to independent entrepreneur wasn't what I planned or expected. The voicemail that declared me out of the family business initially felt like the worst kind of rejection. But in responding strategically rather than reactively, I transformed a painful ending into a beginning filled with possibility. So, what's your story? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family expectations and your own path? Did you stay and fight or strategically step away? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life lessons. And remember, sometimes the most powerful response to rejection isn't argument or anger, but simply moving forward with quiet determination. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the courage to honor your own worth in whatever challenges you face.